Chapter 22 Corpse Corner. Satisfied with his performance, Sonny walked back to the deserted corner of the hall. He felt people looking at him with mockery, contempt, and pity. No one seemed to be willing to stay close to him. It was just as well, he didn't want to be bothered anyway. Still, weren't their reactions a bit exaggerated? It's not like he was carrying an infectious disease. Well, except for the spell. But it wasn't really a disease, which everyone here should have known already. Finally, he extricated himself from the crowd and reached the corner. For some reason, sleepers were unwilling to approach it. Currently, there was only one girl sitting quietly on the bench. Sonny gave her a look. The quiet girl was delicate, demure, and very pretty. Her clothes were tidy and neat. They weren't very expensive, but still rather tasteful. With her pale blonde hair, big blue eyes, and exquisite face, she looked like a beautiful porcelain doll. She was subtly breathtaking. However, there was something wrong with her. Sonny frowned, trying to understand what exactly about the girl made him uncomfortable. After a while, he realized that her empty, expressionless stare was reminding him of Mountain King. Startled, Sonny understood that the girl was blind. It took him a couple of seconds to compose himself. What a shame. A bit disheartened, he carefully sat on the opposite end of the bench. The girl wouldn't have survived the first nightmare if she had been blind prior to entering the spell. Which meant that she lost her sight as the result of the appraisal. It was her flaw. Suddenly, Sonny felt very apprehensive. A cold sensation spread through his chest. And I thought my flaw was bad. No matter what aspect ability the blind girl had received in exchange for her sight, it was effectively a death sentence. A blind person had no chances of surviving in the dream realm, at least not with the dormant core. In some sense, the girl was already dead. She was effectively a walking corpse. Feeling extremely disturbed, Sonny turned away and studied the crowd of sleepers. Now he understood why people were trying to avoid this corner. The girl was surrounded by an invisible, but almost palpable aura of death. Sleepers usually weren't very superstitious, but anyone would feel uncomfortable in her company. Armed with this knowledge, Sonny suddenly saw a pattern in how the young people in the hall were grouped. Instinctively, they all tried to stand close to those of their own circumstance. At the far end of the hall, closest to the stage, were one or two small groups. People in these groups were distinct from the rest of sleepers. They were all confident, calm, and had an air of readiness. These were the legacies. They were trained for the spell since birth and had the highest chances of survival. Castor especially stood out from the rest. Next to them was a larger number of expensively dressed young people. They were lively and excited, and only a little nervous. They were the scions of rich and high-ranking citizens. Their training was pretty good since such families had ample funds to hire private tutors, even awakened ones. Their chances of survival weren't bad. Then there was the largest part of the crowd, which consisted of kids from middle-class families. They might not have had the privilege of training under awakened tutors, but their education wasn't bad. The government spent a lot of effort to put all the necessary knowledge and skills into the school curriculum, preparing potential sleepers in advance. Some of them might have received additional training in private. To survive, these sleepers would need to put in a valiant effort, and also have a bit of luck. But it wasn't improbable. Consequently, they were tense and nervous. And lastly, there was Sonny and the blind girl. The corpses. From the point of view of other sleepers in the hall, their chances of survival were close to zero. How charming! This was how the young sleepers had subconsciously divided themselves. The only exception from this rule was the silver-haired girl, who stood alone and apart from everyone, seemingly indifferent to tension and nervousness that permeated the air. She was leaning against a wall with her eyes closed, still listening to music. But regardless of their group and level of training, everyone was already tired of waiting. When will the damn induction ceremony start? Sonny thought, irritated. As though answering his thoughts, a tall man in a dark blue uniform appeared on the stage. Not only was he tall, he was actually almost a giant. Sunny even wondered if the man's mother had sinned with a bear. Of course, it was impossible. Bears had gone extinct long before the spell even appeared. But he once saw pictures in a book, and they looked sort of similar. A bear-like nightmare creature, then. The giant man had wide shoulders, an athletic build, and a gorgeous brown beard. His eyes were calm and serious. After reaching the center of the stage, he gave Sleepers a long look. When his gaze reached the deserted corner, Sunny suddenly felt nervous. I sure hope he doesn't have a telepathic ability. Otherwise, he might separate me from a limb or two on behalf of his mother. The man didn't pay Sunny a lot of attention and returned his gaze to the front rows of the crowd. Finally, he said in a deep, reverberating voice, "I am Awakened Rock. Sleepers, welcome to the Academy." Everyone listened without making a sound. "In less than a month, you will be summoned to the Dream Realm. Some of you might think that you are well prepared. You're wrong. The spell is merciless and cunning. The moment Awakened begin to think too much of themselves, they die. I've seen countless sleepers like you lose their lives. I've also seen experienced masters lose theirs. Even saints are not assured to survive." "Thanks for the encouragement," Sunny thought sarcastically. "In the following 4 weeks, we will do everything in our power to increase your chances of survival. You will receive training from the best instructors in the world. However, don't be misled by their fame. In the end, whether you return from the Dream Realm alive depends only on one person, you. The responsibility to survive is yours, and yours alone." Except for the legacies, sleepers were looking at each other with growing fear in their eyes. Awakened Rock continued, "You are not children anymore. It's a shame, because you ought to be. But the spell has decided otherwise. You have been to the first nightmare, so you already know what it's like. Your parents, your teachers, and your friends can't help you anymore. Haven't had any of those in a long time." While listening to Rock's speech, Sunny couldn't help but feel a little excluded. It was all old news to him. However, he understood the instructor's purpose. He had to make young sleepers afraid, because fear was the only thing that would keep them alive. Finally, the speech got to the important part. Awakened Rock paused, giving kids listening to him a few moments to digest his words. Then, with a short nod, he continued, "Now we will talk about the difference between nightmares and the dream realm." Chapter 23: Dreams and Nightmares. That was something Sunny was keenly interested in. Of course, he had a general knowledge of how things were set inside the spell. But the first nightmare had already shown him that reality was different from how it was portrayed in popular culture in a number of small, but infinitely important ways. He needed to separate truth from the myths. And, of course, it was very advantageous to hear it from the mouth of someone who had actually been to the dream realm. So Sunny was all ears. Awakened Rock began to speak. "Most people are aware of what nightmares are, because they have an impact on the real world and their lives. All of you have been warned before entering the first nightmare that, should you perish there, a nightmare creature would be allowed to cross the threshold and enter reality. Yup, that was the reason why Master Jet had to wait patiently by his side, prepared to deal with the monster if it appears. First nightmares are unique, because each of them is individual. That's why only a single creature can appear. However, starting from the second nightmare, things become much more dangerous. These nightmares are not tied to an infected person. Instead, they are born in the dream realm. While the seed of the nightmare is growing, any number of awakened can attempt to conquer it. Hunting down nightmares was the main responsibility of the awakened. Sunny knew that much. Should they all die or fail to find the seed before it matures, a gate will open in the real world, letting through countless monsters. You all know the consequences. Other awakened will be forced to withstand the onslaught on this side, but then there can be massive destruction or losses among the civilian population. Opening gates were something that every person on the planet feared. It was also the second disaster brought upon by the spell after the initial appearance of the nightmare creatures. The main difference was that, in that initial wave, there were only dormant beasts. However, gates had ranks of their own, and any type of creature could potentially step through. Not long before Sunny was born, a rank 5 gate opening left a whole continent uninhabitable. Luckily, high-rank gates were very rare. Awakened Rock's voice grew solemn. So it is not wrong to say that the purpose of the awakened is to enter the dream realm, seek out maturing nightmares and close them before any harm could befall the real world. From this, you can see that the dream realm and the nightmares are connected, but are not one and the same. If nightmares are the destination, then the dream realm is the road. But it is also so much more. Very romantic. Does Awakened Rock have poetic inclinations? Simply put, the dream realm is a world. It is vast, mysterious, and mostly unexplored. It is also dead. There is no life out there except for the nightmare creatures, corrupted ecosystems, and now us. But it wasn't always dead. We can tell that once, a long time ago, the dream realm was home to several primitive civilizations. There are a lot of ruins buried in its soil. From what Sunny knew, those lost civilizations were not really primitive, it's just that their development was centered around soul cores and mysticism as opposed to technology. So, basically, miracles and magic. What were their names? How did they fall? No one knew. Maybe they were destroyed by the spell. We don't know if the dream realm exists inside the spell as one of its illusions, just on an unimaginably larger scale, or if it's real, with the spell only serving as a pathway between two realities. However, we do suspect that the illusions conjured up inside the nightmares are based on its history. They are replicas of past events, somehow reconstructed from the depths of time. So, there might have been a real slave caravan on that Black Mountain once, a long time ago. Sunny remembered how time seemed to move in reverse at the beginning of his nightmare. He thought about how things would have ended up without his involvement. Did the nameless temple slave perish in Mountain King's Maw with the rest of the caravan? Somehow, he felt that the nameless slave was not that simple. Otherwise, why would the spell remember him? And what about Hero? Was he able to escape? I wonder. There are 4 main differences between the dream realm and the nightmares. Firstly, it doesn't have a story. There is no predetermined conflict you are forced to resolve. You can move freely and explore, provided that you have the strength to stay alive in the wilderness. Most people tend to stay close to one of the human citadels. That's good to know, Sunny thought, unconvinced. Sure, there were no predetermined conflicts in the dream realm. But with his fated attribute, he was pretty certain to end up in some kind of trouble. So that freedom Awakened Rock had mentioned was relative, in his case. Meanwhile, the instructor continued. Secondly, as I have already mentioned, there are no people in the dream realm except for those who came from the real world. There are only monsters. Some of them can mimic human appearance, though, so be mindful of that. Sunny felt cold sweat running down his back. Nightmare creatures mimicking humans? So creepy. Since when was that a thing? Why hasn't he ever heard about it? He stole a glance at the legacies standing in the first row and noticed that they did not show any sign of surprise. So they knew. Thirdly, unlike the first nightmare, no nightmare creatures will appear in the real world if you die in the dream realm. It may sound cruel, but that's a good thing. Awakened forces are already spread thin. If we had to monitor every sleeper, we wouldn't have resources to handle more important matters. Considering that each sleeper could spend weeks, sometimes even months in the dream realm, there was ruthless logic in that statement. And lastly, and most importantly, unlike nightmares, which are bound by the rules of fairness, there is no limit to what kind of creature you can meet in the dream realm. During its trials, the spell won't pit a dormant human against an opponent many ranks above them. Oh really? Sunny sneered. However, he was forced to agree with Awakened Rock. Even though both Hero and Mountain King were way out of his league, they were still just one rank above him. But in the Dream Realm, no such restrictions exist. Theoretically, you can stumble upon an unholy titan and die before even realizing what happened. So be careful and stick to the regions with enemies on par with your own rank. It's not an ironclad guarantee, but at least there will be less of a chance of you biting off more than you can chew. Sticking to a region populated by nightmare creatures below his rank was even better. That was exactly what Sunny was planning to do. Awakened Rock paused for a few moments, studying the faces of sleepers in front of him. Then he added, "When the solstice comes, you will be drawn into the Dream Realm. The exact location of where you will appear can't be predicted in advance, but there is a high chance that many of you will find yourselves in close proximity to each other. Band together and proceed to the nearest human citadel. Each citadel is built around a gateway. Once you reach it, you will be able to return." Gateways were special portals that served as exit points from the Dream Realm. Once sleepers reached such a portal, they would be able to escape back to reality and become awakened. Their core would evolve, and they would also receive a second aspect ability. After that, they would return to the Dream Realm each time they fall asleep. If you can't locate or are unable to reach the nearest human citadel, search for an unclaimed gateway. It will usually be inside or near the most prominent landmark of the region. Work together to defeat its guardians and come back alive." He gave them a heavy look. "That is all for today. Next, follow the instructions sent to your communicators to find your assigned dormitory. Once settled, you may proceed to the cafeteria for some late supper. There will be a round of interviews after that, to prepare your suggested curriculums. Get a good night's rest. Your training starts tomorrow." With that, he gave them a short nod and left. Sunny sighed. Can't be predicted in advance, huh? With his luck, he would either drop right in the middle of a prosperous human citadel, and immediately roll into a gateway, or appear in some region of the Dream Realm so remote and deadly that no one had ever heard about it or returned from it alive. Let's hope for the former. Since he couldn't do anything about it, Sunny wasn't very worried. There was something much more important on his mind. What, exactly, do they serve here for supper? Chapter 24 Moving Up in the World. Everything having to do with sleepers was situated in the same building. Sunny followed the instructions sent to his communicator, and quickly found the dormitories, which were situated on one of the lowest levels. To his surprise, he actually got a whole room to himself. It had a bed with a soft mattress, a table, a dresser, and even a separate bathroom. The materials were new and aesthetically pleasing, the air crisp and sterile. It was warm inside, and the outer wall was equipped with a hidden screen that seamlessly imitated a wide window, opening to a picturesque vista of a snowy park. There were even several sets of clothes with the Academy emblem provided to him for free. How extravagant, Sunny thought, a little stunned. Rationally, he understood that such an arrangement was not really luxurious. However, to him, who grew up wandering the outskirts, this room was like a palace. He scratched his head. Looks like I've made it? Sunny glanced around, then winked at his shadow and smiled. I guess we're moving up in the world, huh? The shadow didn't respond, apparently not very impressed. Perhaps it didn't care about such things. Right, what would a stupid shadow know? Sunny changed into new clothes and studied himself in the mirror. Then, remembering something, he summoned the runes. He finally had time to study the Puppeteer's Shroud. Memory, Puppeteer's Shroud. Memory rank, Awakened. Memory type, Armor. Memory description, a worm of doubt once found its way into a righteous king's heart. With time, the king was devoured from inside and became its puppet. A lifetime later, the puppeteer worm escaped from the king's dead body, leaving behind a cocoon of black silk. No one knows where it went. However, once people dared to approach the silent castle, they found the silk among the mountains of gnawed bones and fashioned it into an armor. Sunny made a sour face. That is not that terrifying. Yeah. I'm not creeped out at all. Come to think of it, the first creature he killed was called a larva. If he were to assume that Mountain King was a mature puppeteer worm, and already a tyrant, then what the hell would it transform into after becoming a moth? No, it's better not to think about it. With a sigh, he summoned the puppeteer's shroud. Thin black threads immediately appeared around his body and wrapped it into a set of armor. It was made of dark gray, soft fabric with several elements, such as bracers and shoulder guards, fashioned out of black, lusterless leather. The armor was light, understated, and did not restrain his movements at all. It also made no sound when he moved. Perfect equipment for someone who likes to lurk in the shadows. Sunny smiled. He knew that this armor would be tough to pierce for any creature below the awakened rank, which gave him a great advantage in dealing with all dormant monsters. He also felt a sort of strange, faint calmness while wearing it. A worm of doubt, does it have enhanced protection against mental attacks? Somehow, he was sure of it. A great trophy. He wouldn't expect anything less from the memory of a powerful tyrant. The only problem was that the puppeteer's shroud was obviously not meant to be worn on top of a full set of clothes. Quite satisfied, Sunny dismissed it and left his room, heading for the cafeteria. Not bad, he thought, recalling all the rewards he had received during and after the first nightmare. The supper turned out to be as lavish as the dormitory. Sunny's wish to taste real meat finally came true. Not only was it freely available to sleepers, there wasn't even a limit to the amount each of them could eat. More than that, there were rice, bread, various side dishes, sauces, fresh vegetables, fruits, and all kinds of delicious beverages. Extravagant, Sunny thought, steering clear of the coffee. After building a small mountain of food on his plate, he found an empty seat and for a while forgot about the world's existence. As juicy, textured, perfectly seasoned meat filled his mouth, Sunny's vision suddenly was full of stars. He had to hold back an exhilarated moan. And to think, he could have lived like that for a whole year. Damn spell, why didn't you infect me a few months ago? He concentrated on the food, decimating the whole plate in no time. Satiated and more than a little gorged, Sunny longingly looked back and thought about getting another serving. But it was already time for his appointment with the academy personnel. Full of regret, he stood up and left the cafeteria. Soon, he found himself in a small office, sitting across from an administrative worker. The worker was very friendly, and started the interview right away. Just like Master Jet had warned him, Sunny was offered psychological counseling again. Remembering her advice, he refused, and the interview smoothly switched to questions about his aspect. He didn't want to give up information about his abilities, but also knew that he had to tell the worker something. Luckily, the questions were worded in a way to put sleepers at ease. As such, most of them started with nice and polite preambles like, "Would you like to tell me?" or, "If you're willing to share," which gave Sunny an opportunity to give neutral answers. "Would you mind telling me about the type of aspect ability you received, as in combat, sorcery, utility?" He did mind, but had to be careful. I'm not sure. I haven't had time to understand it well." "That's all right. Are you able to directly deal damage with your ability?" "I guess not. Earlier, I wasn't even able to harm a towel." Things went on like that. In the end, Sunny shared just enough information to create an impression that his aspect was weak, harmless, and most likely having something to do with utility. After that, he returned to his room, undressed, and went to sleep. Sunny thought that falling asleep for the first time after the nightmare would be weird, but in fact, it was surprisingly easy. Lying on a soft mattress, with his skin against clean bedsheets, and a fluffy pillow under his head, he slept like a baby. Early in the morning, Sunny washed up in his private bathroom and, bursting with energy, hurried to get breakfast in a happy mood. The cafeteria was a bit crowded. After filling his plate with all kinds of delicious stuff, He quickly realized that the only place he could sit was near the blind girl from yesterday. Her table was empty, since no one wanted to be close to her. Sunny grimaced. It seemed that the two of them were doomed to be outcast together for the remaining 4 weeks. He also felt uncomfortable in the company of someone who was practically a dead person, but there wasn't much of a choice. Losing his good mood, he sat at the blind girl's table and gave a precursory nod to the social worker who was helping her get around. After that, he tried to pretend that they didn't exist and concentrated on his food. However, before he could finish, a sudden commotion drew his attention. "What's going on?" He looked up and noticed that a lot of sleepers were gathered around the large screen hanging on the wall of the cafeteria, their faces filled with excitement and awe. On the screen, a list of names was displayed, ranking the new batch of sleepers from weakest to strongest, most likely deduced from the results of the interviews. Not particularly interested, he quickly found his own name near the bottom of the list. The only sleeper who the Academy judged to be less likely to succeed than him was the blind girl. Turns out, her name was Kasia. But the commotion was a bit too loud to be just the result of the ranking. Curious, he moved his gaze up. The sleepers were restless. How can this be? I'm not seeing things right? What kind of a monster is she?" Castor was placed in second place. And right above him, the portrait of the silver-haired girl could be clearly seen. To the right of it, 2 simple lines of text were displayed. Name: Nephi's true name, Changing Star.